Good morning, everybody. Not a whole bunch of people in early. I've got Shane Lalonde in first. Paul Orchard, what's up? And a few other lurkers that haven't said anything yet, unless it's being filtered. Jack Pines, how you do? Let people kind of filter in a little bit, and we'll get to the good mornings and how's your week's been. I have an echo. Oh, dang it. Give me a second. All right. Test. I have an echo.
Sounds like you've actually got like it's set to like a concert hall setting or something like that.
Yeah. I've got a whole new audio thing, and I am not certain how it works. It was all to remove that coin merge ping.
Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, or good night, depending on where you are, everybody. We'll have a couple more people drop in, so get a Newt, Newsletter Metal Smithy, Randy, Deranged Metalworks, good morning or evening to everyone in here from Kentucky. Well, thank you for joining us from Kentucky. Ulf Birchford, Shane, good evening, good afternoon, good morning. Paul, g'day. Bor Tagov, g'day as well. Michael Robinson, thanks for joining us as well while Yamo figures out his audio issues. He was having major audio issues before we had before we actually started the live stream, and there was a little bit where he couldn't even hear us. So let him fix that. There's no problem. I'm sure we're all good. This seems to happen on about a bi-monthly schedule. Yames has audio issues.
All right. So, out of curiosity, A, is my echo still here? And B, when Speargrass is speaking, does he have echo?
I was kind of wondering the same thing. It's like, are we all echoing, or is it just your mic?
Because I can show you this world.
So
hey,
I just brought up the audio from the live stream. It's just you, Yames. Sully, you don't have an echo. I don't have an echo. It's just Yames's audio. It seems like it's you know how you have settings on PA systems and stuff like that. How you can put that artificial like auditorium echo in. That's what it sounds like.
Yeah, I'm going to transition and show you guys the audio desktop that I have right now.
Gotcha. I was just curious because I'm on my phone with the audio going Bluetooth through my car speaker. So I was curious if that was feeding back in and causing the echo situation. But that's never really happened in the past. But you never know. So I was wondering if I need to stop and pull over and break out my earbuds. Oh shit!
No,
which way am I going here?
It is just me, and I am not certain how to stop it. It is this.
Well, whilst Yam is figuring it out, good morning, Stephen Parsons, and good morning, Mick Chew. Thanks for joining us. And of course, whilst Yam is figuring it out, we'll start off with what's been going on this week. Sully, you're obviously driving. How about you take it away to begin with?
Sure. Well, first off, I'd like to say welcome back to the show, Black Collar Ironworks. It's been a hot minute since he's been in the chat, and missed him. So my week was absolute hell. There's no other way to put it, because prior to this last week, I haven't worked but like a day or two a week, and leading up to Quad State, that is bad, because then there's no money because I'm taking 2 weeks off for Quad State. Anyway, so I went into the office and I was like, hey, you guys are really hosing me on this deal, and boy, the day turned that around 180 degrees. I started at midnight Tuesday morning, and I got off at midnight Friday night, and in between those 2 times, I worked 88 out of 96 possible hours. And then I got in Friday night. I loaded the car, did my laundry, packed my clothes, got everything ready to go, slid into bed at about 2:30, and my alarm went off at 5, and I got ready to go and jumped in the car and left. So I made it yesterday as far as the Sprinkle Donut Forge in Moscow, Texas. Now, my original plan was to kick it for an hour, return the guitar that got left in my vehicle 2 or 3 years prior. That would have been in 19. And yeah, I decided, I was like, well, you know what? I'm going to put 2 beers in the cooler, and I'll have 2 beers with James, and then I'll roll out. Well, 2 beers turned into 4 beers, turned into breaking out a bottle of whiskey, and the next thing you know, it's 7 o'clock and I'm sliding into bed. And yeah, so I fell asleep at just after 7 o'clock last night and slept for almost a complete 12 hours. Oh my gosh, did I need that. I was so tired. And now I'm back on track. I feel like $1,000,000, and I am headed to, easterly. My next stop is going to be Josh Brown over in, I believe it's Alabama. I don't know. Georgia?
Atlanta?
Well, yeah, it's just east of Atlanta, so that's Georgia, right?
I think so.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm pretty sure Josh was in Georgia.
Yeah. And that's my next stop, and I'm about 9 hours out from his house.
Nice.
And,
Is my echo gone? I'm asking the chat.
Yeah, and I'm just now pulling into Beaumont, Texas, and I'm fixing to catch when I'm on 287, and as soon as I catch Interstate 10, I'm going to hook a left-hand turn and head towards New Orleans. And that is my week in a nutshell. I've got the cars overpacked. By the time I get to Yamaz's house, I'm going to have to completely unload it and reorganize everything, but that'll be all right.
All right, test now. How about the echo now? So many settings. But anyway.
Oh, couldn't hear me. I had myself on mute. So, no, you've still got the echo there from what I could hear there, the Ames. But whilst considering we do have a little bit of a special guest on today, let us say g'day to Black Collar and the Army and get the lowdown on how they've been traveling and how have you been?
Well, we're doing pretty good. We've been pretty much up in the mountains, meditating under waterfalls, and breaking logs, falling logs, Yeah, just finding ourselves.
Have you been breaking those logs with your bare hands?
No, top of the head. They just float down the waterfall, and
Fair enough.
Yeah.
So yeah, how is your how is the workshop going and everything going on with it? Have you done anything amazing in that workshop of yours there, Black Collar?
I'm actually getting back into it. Just had to work out some logistics shit. Sorry. Crap. Logistic
right.
crap. But happy to be back, and you'll probably be seeing more of us to come. And that's the Army I'm saying we for, not the Royal We.
Yeah. The Royal We. No. I mean, come on, just call it the Royal We. I mean, it's like.
Oh,
we are on our
Burnt Pot Pie would be happy to hear that. Troublemaker.
Oh, that's good. Sometimes a change or a holiday is as good as a little bit of change.
Maybe that's it. No.
Hey, and if you don't have the audio or the echo figured out, is the echo doable, or is it so pronounced that it's just unlistenable?
Yeah, is it horrible or is it just like a neat effect for now? Is the show actually listenable? Because I will work on it.
But yeah, we don't want to spend the entire show. How about now? How about now?
Randy says it's horrible. Very horrible indeed. Okay.
Anyways, Adam, how has your week been?
Yeah, I was going to say, so while Yamez works on that, we'll talk about my week. My week has been, my week's been one of them again, productive but non-productive weeks. Of course, more editing, did a little bit of yard work. I'm slowly inching towards getting my workshop built. I actually tried to see a guy about buying a tractor this week, and unfortunately he sold it before I got to have a look at it, because of course having a bit of machinery to help me erect the workshop would be a wonderful help. Otherwise I'm going to have to put a call out to a few of my friends that live locally and help get things constructed. But other than that, I finished a commission for a plaque stand that went to a guy that's doing a commemorative plaque for the Northern Territory government, I believe. Not 100% sure on that. But yeah, so I forged up a stand in order to hold that up. And that was due this week so that he can basically give it to them and present it to them in the coming weeks. That's that done. Had a conversation with another mob about he does barbecue fire pits, and he's in discussions with me about making a couple of hand forging a couple of very large ones, because he does laser cutting at the moment. But basically he asked me if it was feasible to get like a 3 foot by 3 foot, 3 millimeter plate, and forge it down into a fire pit. And it was kind of like, I said to him, well, it's doable, but we need a fairly decent sized forge, and also if I was to do it, I'd need someone to help me actually maneuver it, because that side of a plate is neither light nor very maneuverable. So, but he's keen on doing that, so that's might be something to come up in the future. Just jumping in, a couple more people have joined us. Of course, Ben Toombs the man, the myth, legend himself has joined us. Who else has joined us? Kevin Stokes has jumped in and joined us. Paul Fontanini, thanks for coming there, mate. I think that's everyone that's joined in for now. But yeah, so a couple of intriguing bits of conversation with people throughout my week, but I haven't really been all that productive. I had a bit of a barbecue last night. Had a few friends come round and tried to finish off some of the leftover alcohol the wife and I had from the wedding. We made a small dent in it, but apart from that, not much else has happened. Yeah, it's been. I actually spent most of the start of the week in town helping out my dad with a few things. Not very practical on the home front, but yeah, a lot has been done. But yeah, so on the topic for this evening, if you haven't noticed by the screen, we're going to be talking about flux. We had, I'm sure we all watched Roy's attempt on welding a plate to the Harbour Freight Anvil, and that was interesting and informative. But so we're going to actually go through a few. These are in the process of editing the Practical Blacksmithing and annotating the Practical Blacksmithing book. I've actually came across these compounds or recipes for flux, and these were all ones that were used historically at the time. So these are legitimate welding fluxes that were used at the time. Some of them do, actually, I think pretty much all of them do include borax, but it's not purely borax. So we'll have a bit. I'm trying to summon Roy there, Ben, because I'd love to have him in the chat for this topic, just for the meme, potential. And g'day, Aaron. Thanks for joining us. Yamas, did you want to have a quick try, see if that echo's gone before we get into the topic?
Testing.
Whoa!
That sounded like it got worse.
How about me? Echo.
No.
There he is. Look, I swear, saying your name is summoning you there. We're going to be talking about fluxes today. So,
I think Roy should hop on the mic and take over for me while I figure this out.
your echo is actually coming through the Discord now. There,
Yeah. You're even echoing in Discord, so. Yeah, you just sit there and look pretty and let Adam carry the show today.
And make faces at me like you always do. Yes, I'm watching you. So guys, everyone in the chat, if you've joined us today for the live stream, have a bit of a comment. I won't go through these in one solid hit, of course. We'll have a bit of a chat about each particular compound as we go through, and so we'll start off first. So these these do have, most of these do contain chemicals that can be moderately or severely hazardous. Exposure to these can cause skin and respiratory irritation, cough, nausea, and hate. Most exposure is a result of contact with the fumes, which is with finely divided particulate dispersed in the air. So if you do decide to try to make or use any of these recipes, as part of full disclosure, I do recommend that you do wear PPE, both in the mixing and in the use of these welding or flux compounds. So number one, again, these are actually, you can find these all in your, if you have a copy of the Practical Blacksmithing, the original, these are in there. Of course, in my edited version, they will have explanation of some of the actual ingredients, and I'll run through them now as we go through them. So here's a welding compound that will weld equal to a cherry heat. Take 10 ounces of borax, 1 ounce of muriate of ammonia, pound them roughly together. Put them in an iron vessel and roast them over the fire until all the spume, be that froth or foam, has disappeared. Then turn it out to cool. Afterwards, pulverize and keep it in a closed tin box. Use about any like borax, only not so much. The smith that wrote this said, I would use this all the time and consider it equal to any compound in the market. I can weld any kind of steel I have ever tried with it, springs, fork tines, etc. And that was by J.C. McM. So I'm presuming that sounds probably J.T. McMahon. So just to let you know, muriate of ammonia is also a sal ammoniac or ammonium chloride. That was a compound that you can still actually get today, not overly easily here in Australia, but it is a cleaning compound generally used in cleaning detergents and stuff like that. Normally sold by bulk chemical companies. That is recipe one. We do have quite a few recipes to go through, so I'll just jump into recipe number 2 and we'll have a bit of a chat. Of course, kind of creation, Paul from Alicia said silica sand was used in wrought iron a lot. That is true. There are a couple of recipes here that have silica sand as part of the recipes. Jack Pine says, I recently saw someone use sand, I believe, as a flux, I wish I could remember who that was. So yeah, silica sand specifically is a very common ingredient. Sorry, Yamas?
Sorry, I'm testing.
Okay.
Well, you're good.
Yeah,
You're good through Discord now.
Yeah, no, still got the echo in the on the live stream. Yeah, Yamas. But yeah, so it's silica sand is a relatively common used one. We will get to that. I will get to recipes with that directly. So recipe number 2, which was by RS. I will give a recipe for the welding steel that I have used 20 years successfully. 1 ounce of copperas, 1/2 ounce of saltpeter, 1/4 ounce of sal ammoniac, and 3 ounces of salt, 1 1/2 pounds of sand, pulverize and mix together, keep in a dry place. So, of course, copperas is a green crystal hydrated ferrous sulfate, and saltpeter, if those people that have heard saltpeter but don't actually know what it is in the common term, that's potassium nitrate. And of course, sal ammoniac, which is of course muriate of ammonia or ammonium chloride. And that those are the ingredients that aren't common. This is a recipe that uses sand. Of course, that sand is silica sand, and not beach sand. Silica sand, it generally, you're more likely to find silica sand around rivers as opposed to beaches. It doesn't. Beaches contain a lot of shell and particulate, whereas river sand is generally a lot more closer to silica sand. But if you get builder sand is generally often much more composed of silica sand than not. So yeah, it's something you can keep an eye on if you wanted to give a go at these recipes. Yeah, and of course this one included salt. Now, just like Sally, I can see you got your hand up. Sorry, it's not a classroom.
I was going to mention. Well, yeah, I know. I was going to mention that like the sand you buy at the hardware store, which here they call it play sand, actually, and the reason it doesn't contain the shell material is because which is basically calcium carbonate. Which, if you ever look at beach sand under a microscope, you'll see there's not just little fragments of shells. There are microscopic complete shells that are just like it's a fascinating to look at beach sand under a microscope. But the sand that you get as play sand or building sand, construction sand, whatever, comes typically from gravel pits or whatever, where they mine it out, and that is all laid down typically as glacial moraine. So in a lot of cases, the construction sand is of glacial origin, not so much oceanic. So that's all I had.
Well,
just an interesting tidbit that just popped into my brain while you were mentioning it. So carry on.
No, that's very interesting, and I didn't know that. So that's good thing to know. Dylan Corwin, thanks for joining us. Downside to sand is that it melts at higher temps. Boy, that's kind of the actual point. The melting point of glass, of sand into glass, is actually lower than the melting point, or slightly lower than the welding point of steel. So the whole point of glassification of the silica sand is to actually absorb oxygen and impurities that will prevent the two surfaces from welding in the attempt to weld. So you don't want it, of course, too runny, but at the same time, that the silica melting into glass is actually part of the point. Looking at a couple more of the comments, Roy saying he's dropping knowledge. He's having a bit of a comments war with Ben at the moment. Ben's giving him heaps. A couple more comments on who was actually using the sand as flux. Can't wait till we can't wait till we get to his magical pixie dust composition. That's just plain borax, isn't it? There, Roy. And yeah.
He does sprinkle in a little bit of love with it.
No, that's true. That's true. And then, later on, we'll actually get to a one that I have started using. I haven't had any unsuccessful welds since I started using it. I'm still testing it. I haven't made it in the volume that it originally said in the actual text. I've only made like a quarter of it, and that's still heaps. It makes a massive amount. So we'll get on to number 3. Sorry, Yamez. Yep, well, I'm just trying to check that. waiting. Nope, I can't even hear you in the live stream at the moment.
Yeah, how difficult would it be for Adam just to take over the stream?
Yep. I'm trying on. Wait, am I? Yep. No. Okay. I thought I put myself on mute again. Yeah. So we'll move on to the next recipe. So next recipe, and number 3, an excellent welding compound for steel is composed as follows: 2 ounces of copperas, 4 ounces of salt, 4 pounds of white sand. Mix whole, and throw it on the heat as is done with sand only. So this one you don't actually need to make anhydrous. You just have to mix it up and use it as a flux. This one actually doesn't contain any borax whatsoever. So yeah, so that's another one. We should just have a little bit whilst we're talking about that. We should have a quick chat about what borax actually is. So the actual
Borax
composition
acid.
is sodium tetraborate. Sorry, you were saying there, Michael?
Borax. I can't even pronounce it again. So you're good.
Yeah. So yes, sodium tetraborate is what it is. So it's an ionic salt compound of hydrated borate of sodium with a chemical formula Na2H. So that's what one's Na again?
Sodium.
Yeah, sodium. Yeah, sodium, and then 2 hydrogen. So it's a dihydrogenous.
Did you say Na2H or NaH2?
2H. So okay, two salt to 1 hydrogen.
Sodium and 1 hydrogen.
Yeah, two sodium, 1 hydrogen. So yeah, so that is the chemical compound of borax. That's what it is. So it is an actual salt itself. So I would presume that the use of regular salt in some of these recipes actually replaces borax.
You know, and salt does melt. So sodium chloride melts at right around heat treating temperature. So for high carbon steel. So I mean, yep. I had never even thought about. I mean, I've sprinkled salt on stuff to watch for temperature change when it's all bright outside. But it never even occurred to me that maybe it could be used as a flux. I don't know.
And Jack, hang on, with Dylan. Dylan Corwin just shared that his favorite off the wall flux is a mud dauber's nest crutched up. I don't know what is a mud dauber.
It's a wasp.
Mud wasp.
Okay. Yep. All right. Fair enough. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, considering it's that would probably contain a lot of the same sort of compounds as silica sand and all that type of thing. So fair enough.
And wasp larvae. That's the main ingredient.
That's it. Yep. Well, there you go. So yeah, and Hubcap, g'day mate. Thanks for coming in. John Burnell, hello. How are you? Yeah, poor man's temp stick. That's it. So then we'll go. Sorry. We'll find out in a moment. Nope, you're still not in the live stream there. Yeah, well, Paul Orchard just said Trent Tye has a good video on cooking borax, heat it until it melts, and then cool and harden. That is actually to make it anhydrous, and where there is actually a recipe. A lot of these recipes actually state to cook any of most of the fluxes to cook until basically it stops spuming or frothing or foaming. That is an actual good thing to do. But if you're going to do that, you should do it in a well-ventilated space. Again, a lot of these recipes can be, at the very minimum, irritating to your respiratory tract or to skin, to your eyes and stuff like that. Of course, with borax, you can actually just put it in an oven and bake it. Generally bake it about, I think it's about 200 degrees Fahrenheit. I'm not 100% sure. I do know it's a not too high a temperature, basically a tempering temperature. Basically, all you're doing is forcing out the water. You just want to make it as anhydrous as possible, and then keep it in. Once you crush it up, keep it in a airtight container, and only open it when you need to use that to sprinkle on. So anyway, we'll go on to the next recipe. Take copperas, 2 ounces saltpeter, 1 ounce of common salt, 6 ounces of black oxide of manganese, 1 ounce of peroxide of potash, 1 ounce 1 ounce of peroxide of potash. Pulverize these ingredients and mix them with 3 pounds of nice welding sand, being silica sand. Use this compound as you would sand. The quantity is named would cost 20 cents and last a year. So 20 cents is nowadays, considering $1 in 1891 is $32.50 now US. 20 cents would be about 1/5 of that. So what's that? What's 1/5 of 30? $6. So it costs about $6 if you compared it, but some of those ingredients are much more expensive now. Again, copperas is green crystals of hydrated ferrous sulfate. Saltpeter is potassium nitrate. Peroxide of potash is a cyanide compound that is prepared by the reaction of potassium cyanide with ferrous salts. It's commonly used by gardeners. Now, I shouldn't have to say it, but it contains cyanide. Cyanide is nasty, nasty, nasty stuff. This one I don't recommend trying at all. Particularly gasified cyanide is deadly. To put it simply, you don't want to go playing around with gasified cyanide. But yes, Sally, that's it. Yeah, just don't play with it.
Now, potassium cyanide, I never tried. I never looked for that. I did attempt to acquire sodium cyanide at one point in time, which proved to be logistically impossible. Potassium cyanide, I mean, that's just a slightly more reactive cyanide. I would think, because that would be more volatile than sodium cyanide. So I would think it would be just as difficult to get, but I don't actually know. I've never looked for that one, and that's got my wheels turning in a whole different direction now. So.
Yeah, and guys, you got to remember that some of the stuff that is used in gardens and fertilizers and stuff like that, in that form, it's stable and safe, right? But when you start cooking it and mixing it with other chemicals and then baking it and that type of thing and bringing it up to the temperatures that we use for forge welding, that's when it can get I wouldn't say dangerous, but it can get questionable because it's no longer it's no longer in the form of what it's supposed to be used as in the it's same as ammonium nitrate. Ammonium nitrate, of course, is a chemical that's used in a lot of fertilizers, and it's an oxygenator. But you add certain other chemicals to it, and it becomes highly dangerous.
And I would also like to point out that recipe uses potassium nitrate, and potassium nitrate is a very efficient oxidizer as well. And salt was in there. Well, you don't want to accidentally confuse your salt with sugar, because sugar and potassium nitrate are one of those interesting things similar to ammonium nitrate and other things. So yeah, you wouldn't want to accidentally add sugar in that mix. You'd have a problem.
And we're deliberately being very vague on what we're actually describing there, guys, because we don't want to end up on a watch list.
Right?
We're talking enough about chemicals and stuff like that without ending up on a watch list. Thank you very much.
Honestly, I'm okay with the FBI watching our live streams and downloading our podcasts. I mean, hey, that's views and listens. Come on now.
And so Roy said that he's going to have to do a video on this because he believes that most of these hypothetical fluxes only work because of proper welding practices. And Roy, I absolutely agree with that. For the most part, good weld, as you know, comes down to the 5 P's. Prior preparation prevents poor performance. So at the end of the day, you can use all the flux in the world. It's not going to make a good weld if you haven't got good preparation for that weld. But the reason why I hold these to a certain degree as useful is because these are recipes that were sent into a magazine 100 years ago by active blacksmiths. This isn't of course these are fluxes. There are actually points in the practical blacksmithing where people are talking about welding, and just like Roy has stated before and other well-known smiths, that they don't need flux, and learning to weld without flux is actually a very good thing, because when they use flux, it kind of ensures that those welds are more likely to take than because their welds take without flux. So just wanted to share that. Flux is not a metal glue, as we all know. Kevin Stokes, of course, shared some cyanide was used in the jewelry industry. I believe they've moved away from that. Cyanide is generally moved away from now as like lead in petrol. We've moved away from and asbestos in gyprock and wall sheeting. We've kind of moved away from that in general. Yamez, it looks like you're trying to say something. Just checking. Nope, you've still got no volume in the stream there, Yamez. But anyway, so you can just stand there and wave at it. So Jack Pine said, seems like someone was trying to off blacksmith by a bad chemistry. And Ben Toon said, I definitely think both of you are right, because if you have the proper welding conditions, anything will stick to anything. It's like Sally was saying the other week about welding in a vacuum. You don't even need heat. Adequate ventilation is very important, from Aaron Dennis. And sugar and potassium nitrate just make smoke, from John Brunel. Please don't try that, anyone. Of course, it is one ingredient short of something else, but just don't mix potassium nitrate and sugar, please.
There may be an additional component required, and I'm not going to bring that up. So you can do your own research on that. But I have made things with just those two components many decades. Well, not many, but a few decades ago. So yeah, I'll just leave it there.
Okay, question. Can the chat hear me? Can the stream hear me now? And can you guys hear me?
I can hear you.
Sorry, Yamez, we can't hear you.
And yes, Yamez, I can hear you, and you are in the live stream now. You're just a little bit faint. So if you up your volume a bit, you should be sweet, and there's no echo.
But I'm not echoing. Okay, so I can talk.
You've never seen Yamez so excited. He was getting very angry that he couldn't talk.
I apologize to everybody. I'm doing workarounds around those workarounds to fix a simple audio issue a ghost audio issue that we've been having for the past few weeks of random dings from a social media program that I work for, and even with no instances of it on, signed off of it, uninstalled the application for it off my PC, it still randomly dings. No clue why, but it only happens during when I'm running OBS, and so I can't find it. So I downloaded a whole bunch of programs, Voicemeeter, Banana Audio, or virtual audio cables and stuff like that, to kind of control the audio on my computer. I did this a half an hour ago, an hour ago, and I'm learning it. And so basically, to fix the problems with the fix, I am now kind of crossing my cables virtually, and it's just, I will say I am definitely going to have to listen to this podcast, because through all of this, I have no idea what y'all were talking about. I know the topic is flux, and I know that you guys said something about the FBI and everything, and the best thing that could happen to us is we get raided by the FBI for talking about, cyanide and this and that. And then we're on the news about a blacksmithing podcast that's talking about volatile, blah, 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 blah. And everybody goes, a blacksmithing podcast. Let's
Yeah,
check this
there's
out.
no such thing as bad press.
Welcome to your own life. So, yeah, thank you guys for covering for me. And continue.
That's quite welcome. So we'll move on to the next one now. So this one's actually relatively simple. Take 1 part lime to 2 or 3 parts river
Coconut?
sand, such as the plaster you use for finishing a coat. So that's actually unslaked lime, otherwise known as burnt lime, calcined lime, or calcium hydroxide. So basically, that one's a nice, easy recipe to make. Calcium hydroxide and 1 part calcium hydroxide to 2 or 3 parts silica sand, and that's a nice, easy one to make. Of course, calcium hydroxide turns into has a very high heat reaction when you mix in water. So keep it away from water. Again, keep it in a sealed, airtight, waterproof container and only open it up. And of course, use a flux spoon when you go to start handling stuff, because lime will actually start to react with the moisture and sweat on your hands in the event that you try and sprinkle it on with your fingers. Not very friendly. And any more comments? So yeah, that's all for we haven't had any more comments yet.
Wake up, driver, or get off the phone.
Well, there you go.
Sorry, I almost got run off the road there.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so the next one is 1 part copperas, 2 parts salt, 4 parts sand. Thoroughly mix this. It makes a splendid welding compound. That was by a smith called AGC. And Jack Pine said, I've seen that in exothermic reaction when feeding to my pool in Florida. Yeah, with the lime. Absolutely, that does happen there, Jack Pines. Number 8 was take 1 ounce of carbonate of iron. So carbonate of iron is ferrous carbonate. It occurs naturally as a mineral called siderite. Then mix it with 1 pound of borax. And this was used on plows, which of course was a high carbon steel. So some of these these are mostly for steel, not so much for iron. Iron, they use straight borax or silica sand and brought it to a very high heat. Well, steel actually has a lower welding point because of the carbon it contains than wrought iron. So wrought iron you'd actually have to bring up to a much higher heat than you do need to do with steel. Number 9 was by Anxious. Obviously, this smith dealt with anxiety all the way back then. I offer below a recipe for welding steel without borax. Now, Roy, this one should be right up your alley. Copperas, 2 ounces. Saltpeter, 1 ounce. Common salt, 6 ounces. Black oxide of manganese. Of course, we actually mentioned that before. That's actually manganese dioxide. 1 ounce. Prussia of potash. That is, again, potassium cyanide, 1 ounce. All should be pulverized and mixed with 3 pounds of nice welding sand, being silica sand. With this preparation, welding can be done at a cherry heat. So apparently, Roy has plenty to say. Roy, jump in the chat and have a say. I would love to read it out for the listeners out there.
Yeah, what's up with these blacksmiths from 100 years ago saying you could weld at a cherry heat? And Roy just adamantly says, no, you can't.
Well,
Come on, Roy.
It may have to do with the simple fact that, steels were not as consistent back then. There was consistency in steel, but it wasn't as an exact science as it is now, in the sense of So, fun fact: cast iron melts and by proxy welds at a lower heat. Hence, my video, the cast iron anvil, it looks cool. That is true. When I was talking about iron before. Of course, that wasn't cast iron, that was wrought iron. That has a different melting and welding point than cast. Don't get the two confused. They are two very different metals. But yes, Roy, any more that you've got to say on the matter, we would happily read out because you are a wealth of knowledge with practical experience in this welding thing.
Oh, don't inflate his head. I mean, Roy, no, you come on in and prove us.
Educate Roy.
I'm just playing. This is probably the only channel that you'll hear anybody just, talk smack with Roy. Roy loves it.
And also on that comment about welding at cherry heat, this is welding like metals. This is welding steel to steel, and that's and generally high carbon steel to high carbon steel. Particularly when they're talking about plows and stuff like that, they're welding one carbon steel to another high carbon steel. Welding dissimilar metals, being wrought iron to steel or stuff like that, would have not been done at a cherry heat. So just to clarify that. Also, you've got to take into account your light situation as well. So what might be a cherry heat in my workshop won't be a cherry heat in Yamez's or Sully's or your own workshop, because the light and how the light goes into my workshop is going to be different from yours. And that can be anything from where you are in the world. You could even have two shops side by side, but if they're set up at different orientations to the to how the sun actually goes overhead, they're going to pick up light differently as well. So so you've got to take that into account. So of course, and yeah, that's something you have to take into account. Check any visual cues when it comes to welding that is given in any sort of book or by any smith on YouTube or even any smith you're working with is to be used as a guide only, because it's going to slightly change with A, your understanding of the welding, and B, your practice. The more you practice, the more you get used to what your forge can do and stuff like that. The easier it's going to be to pick up on the science. But this, again, if you move to a different forge, that experience is going to come into play, but it's going to slightly change again because of the different situations, the different variables that you're currently experiencing in that different forge. I'm sure Roy can back that up, and he would have experienced, having worked in his old workshop, moving to the new workshop. A lot of things are similar, but things are also different. And Roy said he's going to jump on here and chat up a storm in a minute. Fantastic. Good morning, Robert. Thanks for joining us there today. Aaron Dennis, yes, carbon content does matter. Trout us, they didn't have the internet 100 years ago, so Blacksmith couldn't learn from Roy. Good point. We can all learn from Roy. So, the 10th recipe. I like this. Sorry, the 10th recipe. I like this better than Borax. This is coming from the original author, not myself. But it takes a little more time when it is used. It's cheap. It was back then cheaper than Borax. Those who want to try it can make it by taking a 1/4 pound of rock saltpeter, again being potassium nitrate, and dissolving it in a 1/4 pound of oil of vitriol. Now, I'm going to say what the oil of vitriol actually is, but this is one I highly suggest that you don't mess around with. Oil of vitriol, the current name and knowledge of oil of vitriol, is sulfuric acid. So needless to say, don't go playing with acid unless you know what you're doing. Okay? And adding 1 gallon of rainwater. So after scarfing the steel, get it red hot, quench it in this preparation, then heat and weld as the same as iron. Hammering very quickly with light bros, keep the compound in stone jars with tight fitting lid, and it'll be good for years. And Yames, I can see you raising your hand. Why are people raising their hand when I talk?
Tangential point, not related, but semi-related. Vitriol was actually one of my early gamer names, gamer tags, because it means harsh criticism. Sorry. Continue. Hi, big dog.
Yeah, I would like to point out that the order of operation there was incorrect. You never add water to acid. You add acid to water. And I don't know about that. I don't know how pure that is, because like 30% sulfuric acid reacts explosively in water. So that one there has me a question mark above my head going, wait, what? That's a really bad combination. But what was the other compound in there, Adam, before the sulfuric acid?
Oil of vitriol.
Saltpeter. So oil.
Okay.
Saltpeter. So potassium nitrate.
Potassium nitrate. Okay, so maybe there's some kind of reaction between the potassium nitrate and the sulfuric acid that happens before you add the water. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. That's very interesting, but it's not so interesting that I would like to try it.
Well, again, but see, I'm a little bit questioned about that as well, because you're adding something that contains sulfur with something that has saltpeter in it. So again, not mentioning what those ingredients can actually make, but because I don't want to end up on a watch list. Thank you very much. But yeah.
Then if you're near a coal fire, you've got the other one, and yeah, so.
Precisely. So not exactly something you want to go mixing. So again, guys, just these, while some of these recipes are, again, all of these recipes were used historically, some things you don't want. And yes, Aaron, the presence of sulfur will prevent welding most of the time. Depending on the amount of sulfur and everything, because of course most steel actually contains sulfur, and most rock coal will contain parts of sulfur as well. There's very few rock coal that doesn't contain sulfur, even when you turn it into coke. So small amounts of sulfur don't actually cause too much of an issue when it comes to welding. It's when there's too much. Now, if you noticed, this is actually something that they quenched in before welding, and I think they relied on that reaction of sulfur to make it easier to weld by removing some of the or replacing some of the carbon or whatnot in it. I'm not 100% sure of the chemistry there, but I think it's something that through the research that I've been doing, with actually a fairly common practice of adding some sort of sulfur in order to help weld.
Now that stress proof that I have, it's very high sulfur. I mean, it's pretty high. I saw the chemical composition sheet on that stuff a few years back when I got it, and in the spec sheet it says it's not forgeable and not weldable, whatever. It's supposed to be just a machinable steel, and it forge welds quite nice. It hardens quite nice, and it forge welds very easily. I mean, so. But I don't know. It might be something just about the particular chemical makeup of that steel. I'm not really sure, but I do know it had a wicked high sulfur content compared to most steels. And I was just like, wow, that's really surprising. And I thought to myself, like, that must be why it's considered to be not forgeable. So.
But and Yamas, I could see you were itching to say something too.
No, I was waving to John. Hi, John.
And Roy entered in.
And we have Roy.
G'day, Roy. Roy's going to go through and tell me just how wrong I am with all of these.
and you know what? Before the gloves come off and the fists start flying, I'd like to say keep it civil. No headshots. Keep it above the belt. Body shots only. Keep it clean. This is all for the purposes of information. The back and forth discussion is an important aspect for learning. So,
thanks for the build up on that, Yama. Can everybody hear me okay, by the way? No echoes and all that good stuff?
Sounds good.
Yep, cool. Sounds good on my end too.
Cool. So, yeah, well, I don't want to, I'm not going to burst anybody's bubbles or talk a whole lot to the particular chemical compositions of flux, because I'm not a chemical engineer. I'm not a chemist. So I really can't speak to any of the particular blends of flux. But one thing that I would like to say is if you think about it, you have to weed through some of these articles and people mixing things together, because I've heard guys say, oh, what I do is I just go out and I grab my kid's play sand and I mix it a little bit with some donkey manure, and then I and then I sprinkle it with some table salt, and then I stick my steel in the forge, and it gets up to temp, and boom, you've got yourself a forge welding flux. So so you have to take, you know, all those things with a grain of salt, I guess, is what I would caution anybody who's, thinking about putting together chemical mixtures, especially when you yourself don't know what potential harms or hazards
Or a grain
could
of
come from
sand.
those. Because I know I have some commercial boric acid flux that will give you an instant sinus infection. Like if you get any, like even the slightest whiff of it in your nose when you're forge welding with it. It's great stuff. It's great stuff. It cleans out the scale quite well, but it will end up, it does cause quite a bit of health issues. So I have to wear a mask whenever I use that, just to basically, and keep my face out of it, just to keep down on the fumes, because it does fume off quite a bit, when you're welding on it. And so with some of these other chemical compositions, I heard one, and it was in a different book. I need to go back through my library and look it up. But basically, they were they were advocating for mercury being as part of the flux ingredient.
Yep.
I
actually saw
so
that in a
again,
different part. Absolutely.
yeah, and so again, these are guys of their time saying, "Hey, I mix this with this, and it seemed to work." Right? And although what part of it worked, and if you look across all these formulas, they have a kind of reoccurring theme a little bit. It's in different quantities, but they do have a reoccurring theme. So I personally would be interested in seeing somebody else's video on that, from a chemical standpoint, and maybe trace out what exactly is it that is, creating these magical welds for everyone. I would reckon to guess that it's the recognition of proper welding temp. It is the cleanliness of the fire, remove the scale and oxygen from the surface of the pieces, and making a weld with some sort of compression device, whether it be a press or a hammer blow.
Yeah, and on that note, Roy, that is something that's very important. When I was working under my mentors growing up, there was something that said to me about it. When you're doing a weld, everything has to be enough. And that is, I'm just trying to find, so everything has to be enough. So what that means is you need to have enough fuel to begin with. You need to have a fire that's clean enough. It's got to be free from clinker and ash and all that type of thing. Also has to be, an oxygen-free environment. You need a forge that's hot enough, and that's even before you put the steel in. You have to have your fire up to temp before you put your steel in, so it needs to be hot enough, and your metal needs to be clean and prepared enough, and then you have to be free from distractions and focused to be fast enough to get that weld to set. So when you're doing a weld, it all has to be enough. That was something that I was taught, and again, it comes back to those 5 Ps: prior, preparation, prevent, poor performance. So would you agree?
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. That is a good baseline. That being said, I've also forge welded in plenty of fires where I haven't cleaned out any of my clinker or any of my ash, but it had the downside that I had to bring my steel up a lot. Well, not a lot hotter, but I had to force more air into the firebox to get through all the junk that was in the bottom of my fire pot, and therefore I ended up getting more blisters on my steel. I took a higher chance of burning the steel, and so that's why those generalities come in. Well, you want a clean fire pot, so you want to clear out your clinkers and your ash right before you get to welding. You want to have enough fuel. So that way the fuel consumes the atmospheric oxygen in the environment. So this way you can have a neutral environment in where you're welding. And then you got to have it hot enough, not red, not 1,000 degrees. You have to have it hot enough in which that the two materials can be joined, So, and so all of that cleanliness and all of that, those are all good and best practices to definitely have. So I definitely agree with it, and for those who are listening and don't know the gag, I'm not a person. It's not like I don't use flux. I don't hate on people who use flux. What I dislike is the overuse of flux and the thought and the theory that, well, if you just throw more on, it's going to make the weld better. And what it does is it kind of, how do I say, is it hampers? No.
That'd be correct.
It hinders your ability to recognize what a good forge weld is, what a good forge welding heat is. You're throwing a Band-Aid on a boo-boo, so to speak. You're not diagnosing what the actual problem is. You see guys, beginners all the time. I forge weld this, I bring it out, smack, smack, smack. Oh, it didn't stick. I guess I didn't put enough flux on. And it wasn't hot enough. Or you had it jabbed down into the airstream in the bottom of the fire pot. But they'll dunk it in a bottom of a bucket of flux and stick it back in there and hope that this magical glue will, stick everything together for them. And they ended up with roasted pieces. And I've even heard more experienced smiths say, "Oh, well, forge welding, it's quite mystical. Sometimes you get a good weld, sometimes you don't." It's like, no. Chain makers back in the day didn't get that luxury. So there you go.
Forge welding as a science, and one thing that people have to understand is that no amount of flux will overcome bad welding practice. Doesn't matter what you use, it's not going to if you haven't got most of those. Now, when we're talking about be enough, that's not. Those are guidelines, of course. If as Roy said, you don't always have to clean out your fire pot. But having a clean fire pot is going to help ensure that there's a better likelihood of you getting that forge weld done. Having clean metal, I'm a big dog, Tim, proved that you can weld together, dirty metal, so to speak. But having clean metal helps ensure a better likelihood of getting that forge weld.
Now, I've often, and I've done it live several times. I've done it, with people in my shop. I've done it at the coffee grounds, taking cable full of, particles and grime and grease and nastiness, untreated, just nasty crap that Sully had given me, and heated it up and forge welded it into a solid, homogeneous, billet. It's and no flux used. It's not, flux isn't a requirement, and that's what Roy's point is. It's an assist, and it's not you don't use it as a crutch, So.
And I saw, Sully, you were trying to say something.
Yeah, missed opportunity. It's too late. So continue.
Sorry about that. Just go back to the chat for a thing. So Coffee said, since borax is salt, can you use plain salt? Salt's used in a lot of the recipes that I'm going through there, John. So maybe. No, I haven't seen anything where they just use salt. But hey, give it. If weld something together, give it a try. Just like Roy was saying before, there's a lot of mystical. So Paul Orchard was saying about how he uses koala poop. Why not? Give it a go. Then who else? couple of comments about Roy joining the chat. Eric was saying, I've seen you use flux before, Roy. I took a screenshot of both times they hang on his wall. A few other ones about using salt and stuff like that. You need a neutral fire for a good weld. That is true. So I'll move on to another recipe here. So this is another one. This is equal quantities of borax and pulverized glass, well wetted with alcohol and heated to a red heat in a crucible. Pulverize when cool and sprinkle the compound in the heat. So this is one that uses borax and just glass. The next one is 10 parts sal ammoniac, 10 parts borax, 1 part sal ammoniac. Grind or pound them rough together, fuse them in a metal pot over a clear fire. That's being a clean fire. Continue to heat until the spume has disappeared from the surface. When the liquid is clear, pull the composition out and to cool and concrete, then grind to a fine powder. So that's, of course, something, glassifying something and then grinding it. And then finally, one that I actually think is one that I've mixed together and started to test myself. I haven't got any videos on it yet because I wanted to make sure it was that my forge welding technique was good enough first. So I'll give the archaic version, and I actually give my modern version, one with all the correct weights and stuff like that. After I get that, anyone feel free to give their opinions on it. This is the original recipe by E.T. Bullard. I wish to say a few words with respect to the using of sand in welding. The question seems to be, shall we or shall we not use sand in making welds? Consider it a very essential point in working steel. I use a composition which I prefer as follows. So this is a conversation using flux or not using flux that goes back hundreds of years. So take a quart of sand, 1 pint of common salt, 1 pint of pulverized charcoal, a half a pound of borax, well burnt. Mix these well together in a sandbox and consider the preparation much better than raw borax for working steel. In working iron, I omit the borax from the compound completely. So, of course, this actually specifically mentions working steel versus working raw iron. Now, the non-archaic terms, and this is one of the simplest, safest recipes in the book, and like I said, one that I've actually started putting together for myself. And I don't make it in the quantities mentioned in the original recipe. I used about a quarter of all those, but just to give you an idea of what it is. So it's 3.4 pounds of quartz sand or silica sand, 2.26 pounds of salt, 0.22 pounds of pulverized charcoal, and 0.5 or half a pound of anhydrous or roasted borax. That's completely without water, roasted at 200 odd degrees for 2 hours in an oven, and mix those together and keep in an airtight container until use, and use sparingly. Again, it's one of the things that you don't have to use a pound of it whilst you're trying to make a forge weld. Anyway, that's one that I'm trying at the moment. Give a thoughts.
I just noticed we got Big Dog that popped into the chat. I thought he might want to say something.
I actually pulled him. He was in the wrong voice chat, and if you intended to be in the wrong voice chat, I apologize. But being an admin, I have the ability to move people into the proper chat. Big Dog, you have a mute button on your screen. You can press to talk if you'd like.
Did I lose audio or? Well, the majority of these episodes, recipes, contain borax, and I can't help but wonder if maybe there's no real performance enhancement beyond just the borax. I mean, like, sure, you can weld without flux, and if you a little bit of borax helps with capillary action remove some forge scale or impurities or what have you. I mean,
exactly.
How much an advantage do you get by mixing all these other things in there that may or may not off-gas a toxic substance?
And see, that's part of the reason why I actually like the one that I shared, because I can see the benefit of the one, because you've got your borax in to help capillary action off the impurities. You've got the charcoal in there to help burn any extra oxygen that might be in there that would also prevent the weld. The salt and the borax would also work to that capillary action and glassify, as would the sand or any sand that's used. So the quartz sand that's used, again, that glassifies and helps draw out. So this discussion on using borax versus sand, as we can see, is something that's happened 100 years ago plus. This book was first published 130 odd years ago. So this is a conversation that's been happening forever.
I would imagine it's been an argument that has existed since the beginning of blacksmithing. So, you don't need that much sand.
Yeah, I noticed Tim unmuted himself. If you'd like to try to talk, I'd love to hear his voice.
Tim, can you hear us?
Good search.
He's
gone back to mute.
Microphone issues.
Could be.
Probably. How about you, Roy? Have you got anything to say on that particular recipe?
Tons.
I don't have anything I don't have anything particularly to say about the mix. If it's something that you found that's helpful, or that it works in your shop or your workflow, I'd be fine with it. I'll just go back to that. There's a common element and a common theme that's been pointed out here, and it kind of basically it all revolves around borax at some point in time, or a particular salt of some kind, or sand. And I think that's why it's kind of gotten. I think it kind of got boiled down eventually. Like, oh, okay, yep, all these other little compounds, yeah, they might add some marginal benefit at best, but the best practices is to keep a good, clean, hot forge welding fire that has a low oxygen environment and make the weld there. I did want to speak to something a lot earlier about the lower temperature, welding at a lower temperature, and where in these historical documents people are talking about bringing it a weld at a cherry red. My mentor and long since passed friend, Raymond Sim, when he would speak in terminology of color that was a lot lower than what my reference frame of what color was on the steel. And so like a dull red for him, so like a dull red would be just red. What I would consider is a cherry red would be what he would call blood red. And then what I considered to be a bright orange, almost a yellow heat, he considered to be cherry red. So I think that there's some loss of that over time, right? Like throughout history of that jargon, that those things shift over time. We work in a lot brighter environments now, in most cases, as where they didn't have electric lamps back in the day. So they had gas lamps. So they had a different type of they had a different Kelvin color they were working with in their shop as well. So the type of light that they were working with in their very dark smithies, I think that affects a lot to that color thing. But as far as a fact, for scientific fact of physics, the temperature of the steel has got to reach a certain temperature, no matter what color it is, in order for it to get to the point where it can start to melt. And those two surfaces can be bonded. So
on that, and I actually, it's a very good point you make about the type of light, because particularly with, and again referencing back the fact that I've deep dove into practical blacksmithing. And if particularly in the first volume, it talks about shop build and shop setups. And they talk a lot about it being well lit and well ventilated. And that's well lit in sunlight. So as we all know, working your colors, particularly when you're working in decent sunlight, it might be shaded, but when you're working under sunlight, looks different to what it does in a dim or dark shop. So I think, and you're very much right in what you're saying about those color references have shifted. Because as you would well know there, Roy, when you're working at a cherry red in even shaded sunlight, looks a lot different to that same temperature when you're in a well or a well ventilated but well enclosed shop.
Yep, exactly. So yeah, like in my shop, I have a lot of video lights up. I got a lot of bright lights that come down. And before I had the barn siding up, the color temperature in the fire actually looked completely different than it does now. Because now that I don't have any excess light coming through because I've got everything closed up and I just have the lights in the shop when I have all the doors closed when I'm filming. The color temperature actually looks different. It looks different. And like on video, just to breathe more into this, on video, it's very difficult because what you don't see is located about 2 feet out of frame, or not even that, about a foot out of frame. And I mean framing on the camera angle. I have 2 spotlights blasting the anvil with light. So this way I can, I can reduce my camera settings in which that I can make it not look like the fiery face of God when it comes out of the forge, and I can get a truer color as to truer to life. But in the shop, it looks super dark.
Yeah,
because
I
I
have
got so much light hitting it directly. It looks like it's not at welding temp, but in the video, and I didn't get to fully share it in the video, but the cast iron had already started melting and running into the bottom of my fire pot. So the cast iron was already at a melting temperature when I got the faceplates up. But on video, it looks like the cast iron was at one of those magical lower temperatures that you would use the magical pixie flux for.
I will say that that was an awesome video, and I bet removing or cleaning that up was a pain. But I hear you on the shop lights and show lights to get that right video, and it kind of I've learned to forge in that light.
Yeah, and you also have to retrain yourself when you go do demonstrations and shows. This is for anybody out there that is doing shows and demonstrations. If you're in the middle of an asphalt parking lot on a bright summer sunny day, everything will look black to cherry red. And I'm putting air quotes in the air right now, even though you can't see me. So it'll look cherry red, but it'll be sparkling at the end.
It's so rough to forge in the sunlight. I have so much trouble. If you guys remember my beach videos, those videos, and one big reason why I haven't done any more is I struggled so much to do those videos because of the lighting and simply forging in bright sunlight. It was insanely difficult for me.
Yeah, I did a youth retreat once, and I mean, the whole weekend I was out in the middle of just bright sun, and I have never burnt more pieces of steel up in all of my career than that weekend. And I wasn't even trying forge welding. I was just trying to do simple stuff like S hooks and make fire pokers and things. And oh man, I melted so much steel that weekend. So it was like the 4th of July.
Right.
I can see Big Dog's unmuted himself again. Did you want to have a say, a pipe in there, Tim? And what's your thoughts on this whole topic? Nope, looks like we've still got nothing from Big Dog.
Yeah, he said in the chat he can't get the mic working. I'd like to take a note and say Black Collar Ironworks, welcome to Bubba. It is one of my channel members, membership levels, and very much appreciate it. Very, very much appreciate it. I have been.
Yay!
I didn't get a chance
You're
to do
welcome.
my week, how my week was this at the beginning of the show. I do have a list of emojis that I am going to add, and I just haven't gotten around to it. But yeah, it's been such a busy it's been a busy past 5-6 weeks for me. I still got a package that I need to ship to Australia. I still got to pack for Quad State. I still got to do laundry.
All right.
Yeah.
If it's okay with Roy, can you use the emoji for what I just made?
I actually have a couple flux emojis. I have the one that you made a while ago. I have Roy's face saying no flux needed, and I have the Marabo. Those are the ones that I currently have. The trouble with the emojis is they have to be a 1-to-1 ratio.
Oh, okay. Well, I guess that's what I meant. I'm terrible with the lingo.
Yeah, they have to be a 1-to-1 ratio. So I have Roy's Roy brand Borax metal glue, and then Roy saying no flux needed.
Yeah, so just to go back to chat for a sec. So Dylan Corwin said the UV spectrum is perceived differently by each person, which is why we all have different colors, why we all prefer different colors, and some colors are brighter than others for different people. And it's also the reason why, particularly those people that experience color blindness and stuff like that, they see colors differently as well. So and that all comes into effect when it particularly comes to forge welding. And as we were just discussing before, depending on your environment, if you're forging in a black carpet parking lot or car park, that the reflective light affects it as well. So again, none of these fluxes are designed are supposed to be used as metal glue. They're all assistant compounds. And Roy also put it very straightforward. Most of these contain sand or borax or some sort of salt, and so those things are the essential ingredients, so to speak, that again assist with those forge welds. But if you don't have the right conditions for a forge weld, you're not going to get a forge weld. It's as simple as that. In an oxygen-free environment with no gravity and stuff like that, metal will stick together without the use of heat, as we've discussed previously in other episodes. But here on Earth, that those situations, we have to eliminate the oxygen from a hot fire with plenty of fuel and all that type of stuff. Make sure the metals are clean. None of these by themselves will ensure a guarantee a successful forge weld, but having them all together is definitely going to help.
So I'd like to just point out that I find it I find it kind of quite an honor to still be having this kind of conversation hundreds of years later, and knowing that our forebears have been having this kind of conversation and open dialogue about flux or no flux, temperatures, this type of material, that type of material. We've been doing this as blacksmiths, and we've been carrying this on generationally now for hundreds, if not maybe even potentially thousands of years. And I particularly find that quite an honor to count myself amongst, smiths of, the ye old yesteryear. I don't know if anybody else thinks that way or not, but I do find that particularly humbling, So this is one of those topics that will never be, how do I say, will never be settled, so to speak.
Yeah.
Right? It's going to be something that they will continue to talk as long as there's blacksmiths. We will continue to be having these discussions for hundreds of years to come.
Yeah, I'd like
There's
to
no
say
right answer.
Exactly.
Yet it's a conversation that lasts for millennia.
Yes. I'd like to do a quick shout out and thank you to Dylan Corwin for the $20 super chat. Much appreciated. Much appreciated. Thank you. But yeah,
Hey, Dylan.
and this isn't the only conversation or topic that that people can go back and forth on for hours and hours and hours and hours and years and years and years and years, you know, on end. Like in any technical trade or even any artistic environment where there are multiple methods to achieve the same results, you will have those same arguments. And everything from hammer grip, Roy, uh, to flux, to the use of junk steel or not junk steel, to whether or not a bladesmith is more superior than a blacksmith, blah blah blah. All those different back and forths in any sort of sense can be attributed to the same, and it's excellent topics. It's excellent dialogue, and that's what we're here for.
And Aaron actually made a good point too. Each metal alloy could have its own optimal flux application. Now, particularly in the metallurgy in the last 130 years has advanced so far. We have more concrete knowledge about metallurgical application now than they did in the late 1800s. So that may be true as well. The optimal amount of flux for a particular forge welding application could be true. Now that we know so much more about steel, we also know definitively, and we know it, that we don't need flux to weld, and that's a point Roy was making before. It's not a necessity; it just assists. Depending on the situation, I mean, if you're doing a large, and I believe Roy has covered this particular topic before, in the sense if you're doing a large surface area like an anvil, using flux is going to help more than if you're doing a small surface area like something like a chain, because you have to force all that. If there's any inclusions and stuff like that in that plate, you have to force all them out. And that takes a lot more than forging it out of a smaller surface area like a chain. So, that's something you have to be aware of your different applications as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Have we got Tim in now? Is his microphone working this time? I saw him drop out before and hopefully back. No. Okay. So, any more
Tim,
comments?
if you figure out the microphone, just pop it into the written chat, and we can defer to you.
Yep, that's it. Coffee said borax has been used since the 8th century. Was it used for forging then? Yes. If everything that I can find, prior to the 8th century, sand or no flux was used in welding. And basically from the late 8th century, 9th century onwards, borax, sand, and different mixes have been used as flux in various compositions. Now, something I will add, there's actually, I do have a recipe for a soldering flux. So some of the soldering fluids that they used were injurious to the tools and also to parts that have been laid to the bench where the fluids have been used. So this recipe for flux is historical as well, and it didn't cause rust or tarnish more than water would. So it was 2 ounces of alcohol put into a bottle, and added to that was a teaspoon of chloride of zinc or zinc chloride, and shake until dissolved. You use the same manner as any other, so hydrochloric acid or anything like that, that was used historically as a soldering flux, and of course it didn't smell. So that's another type of flux that's used, soldering or brazing, that can still be used today as well. And of course, again, with fluxes, always be aware of fumes. Use the proper type of PPE if you have the chance. Paul says, he says, I do Roy every time I light my forge and smash up hot steel. I think of how it was done, and if it was the only way to do it. And hopefully everyone does that. I mean, whenever I'm making something, I always think about how other people do it and you know, how I'm doing it. And, you know, there's more than one way to skin a cat.
Yeah.
Not that I've ever
Usually
skinned
more
any
than
cat.
one way.
I
Unless
mean,
you're the cat.
never mind. I've been watching a lot of horror movies lately, so I was about to go off on that comment, but not appropriate. But yeah, wow, I have so much stuff on my screens. I'm still trying to research how to properly use this audio stuff. I'm definitely going to have to be listening back to this podcast.
See,
Well,
what you should have been doing is making notes about what you did at particular timestamps.
Oh, geez.
So I do want to say something. So thank you, Sully, thank you, Adam, thank you, Yamez, all for having me on and poking the bear, so to speak, on that. I'm gonna go ahead and cut and run out of the
Yeah.
chat and stuff. But
Yeah.
you know, again, thanks for all that you guys are putting together and the research you're doing, and you know, these are all great things. And you know, it creates very interesting conversations. And I'm hoping that before the end of the stream, Big Dog can figure out the mic, because I just love hearing his sultry voice.
Yeah.
And without further ado, you guys have a great weekend. Thanks for having me
Hey,
on.
Roy, before you go, speak about poking the bear. Did you see the picture I made for you?
Yeah.
No, I have not yet.
And Roy, I'm going to need a 3D scan of your head for my Roy bot to walk around Quad State and hang out with me. I need a 3D. Yeah.
I'll see what I can do. It's
not going to be in the tent with me. Don't worry.
Yeah.
I need a Roy bot.
Thanks for joining us, Roy.
Love you, Roy.
So just to go back to chat, Derain says an aspect that hasn't been covered is Japanese style forge welding. So when it comes to Japanese style forge welding, this argument has existed in Japan as well. Now, not so much on the side of borax versus non-borax, or sand. There was sand that was used as flux. According to my research, that was used as flux in Japan as well. However, another thing that they've used, and something I've also come across quite frequently in my research, has been resin or rosin, which is generally a derivative of pine tar or pine sap. And that is another thing that has been used extensively across the world as an ingredient or as a flux. Now, that is something that was in the Japanese style of forge welding. It was, again, like what has been for the European side or Western side of things, is it's no flux versus sand versus borax. From my understanding of what I can see from the Japanese side of things, is it's no flux versus sand versus resin. So this isn't an isolated thing among Western smithing. This goes worldwide back to the start. And of course, I can't find much information on what was used as fluxing before probably about the 9th, 10th century. Like I said before, from what I could find, borax is created in the 8th century-ish, or discovered in the 8th century-ish, has been used pretty much from them as a form of flux. Prior to that, there's not much information, but I can imagine, again, it would have been none versus sand, and probably some sort of resin as well, because what is it? I can't remember what it's called. Turpentine is something. Is something that we have been using as a human species for a long time as well, and that is a derivative of pine and tree that's made from the materials of pine and tree sap as well. So rosin resin is also something that we've known about and used for years, and yeah, that's something that probably would have been used as well. Sully, I can see you wanting to say something as well.
I was just thinking, not much on flux prior to the 8th century, and I mean, I would think that in the 800s or whatever, that your blacksmith was likely not educated enough to be able to read or write, so they wouldn't have necessarily the ability to write that stuff down, because you don't need to really write it. You just tell your apprentice, or you tell the other guy, whatever. However, when you get into the people of those times that were documenting these things, like doing a little manuscript or a book or bringing up the town blacksmith or something like that, flux would have been so deep into the weeds in blacksmithing, it would probably never even come up for somebody that's not specifically talking about forge welding steels together and stuff. So I can see how prior to that it could be a topic that is lost to history just because it just was never written down.
Now it's my chance. Go ahead, sorry.
I say, or communicated to the people that were writing stuff down at the time.
Now, it's my chance to digress, and special shout out to a friend of mine that gives me regular feedback on how the show's going and his thoughts on it. This is a guy that's not a blacksmith, but I actually introduced him to Letterkenny because he asked me about what us going. To be fair, he asked me what that was about. But he also made the comment that that apparently Sully says, "But I digress a lot," or something along those lines, and he's turned it into a drinking game. So it's my turn to digress now. And on that point about education in the 8th century and around that time and earlier, the funny thing about that is you got to remember blacksmiths were businessmen. So blacksmiths were actually, and most businessmen were actually well educated. The reason why the myth that they were illiterate and stuff like that persisted is because, particularly in the UK and stuff like that, the ruling class spoke German, but they generally spoke German, French, and Latin. So if you didn't speak those 3 languages, you were classified as illiterate. English was actually written and used and documented, and mathematics and stuff like that was well known, particularly among businessmen, because they had to. How can you keep track of your stock if you don't know how to do maths? How do you know how to charge, how much money you've made in the week, and all that? How can you send away for supplies, and write a letter to your supplier?
Sorry? I heard Big Dog. I heard Big Dog.
I did too.
I don't have to be educated. My wife does it. How y'all doing?
Fantastically, all the better for hearing you.
I'm doing good.
I am so busy.
Do I have an echo?
No. The echo. The echo was on my end with the new software that I have.
I heard that.
Yeah, it was what I'm assuming it was, because I was scrambling for fixes, pushing buttons. My new audio program was pulling audio from one mic, and I had that mic also being the mic for the main audio input and this and that. So in Discord, I turned that mic off and restarted a completely different mic. I'm using these as a mic instead of this as a mic. And this is the mic that was causing the echo. So turn off the problem mic. I fixed it. Yay!
Good job.
So it was just me.
So I've been listening, and all good stuff. This has turned into quite a production you guys are putting on. Congratulations. All good information. Really like it. So keep it up.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm glad that we were able to turn this into um, quality production. You know, from when I first took over for you, it was just me sitting in front of a camera chatting and talking, and you know, like, help me, help me. So yeah, these two, Adam and Sully, have like really helped me step up my game.
Oh, I don't know about that, Yamaz, but you know what? Sometimes it takes a village and more than one brain to get a thing done. You guys are doing a fantabulous job. I really like it, so keep it up.
So Big Dog, what do you think on the fluxes that we've shared and the discussion we've had about forge welding? Like it is mainly all about your prior preparation, but what's your 10 cents on fluxes and stuff like that?
I'll keep it as short as I can, but it's a discussion I could talk about for probably hours on end. But we'll start with regional. And when I talk about regional, you have to remember that not everyone in the world had the same devices for forge welding throughout the millennia. So those who were unaware of borax used other types of acid, and acids that are put into solution, typically dry onto a material. The boric acid in borax is easy to handle and really isn't active until it becomes fluid. So in the forge that happens, and it helps to float away and turn other materials into solvents and push them out. But really what you're doing is just encapsulating and guarding or protecting the carbon molecules in the steel from the air. That's why a lower carbon content material will weld easier without flux, less carbon, less interaction in those molecules to push those pieces apart. Anyway, so regionally speaking, folks use things like Japan was famous for using a clay and straw mix. And really, what they were doing was making a little crucible around the steel they were getting ready to forge weld to protect it from the oxygen. The heat could get up high enough to melt those together without a lot of oxygen getting to it. By the same method, you when you forge weld a good wrought iron, it has silica in it because it was used under they used power hammers, very large steam power hammers in most cases, to drive that stuff together, fold it, drive it together. It's really a pattern welded steel, and it has remnants of that silica running through it that acts as a natural flux for that iron, and it's a lower carbon content. So you can really weld wrought iron with no flux whatsoever. A lot of folks have used mill scale or fire welding scale and crushed it. And it works very much the same way. It will re-liquefy at a certain temperature and it will coat the outside. And if you don't have too much of it between a weld, you can push it out and it'll work well as a fire welding flux. Joey Vandersteeg has put up many videos on using many different types of things as flux, but that was one of them. Fire scale works really well, ground in the right way. I particularly like cast iron powder, and I will mix it with some borax. Cast iron powder melts at a much lower temperature. It adds carbon to the surface, and what carbon is burnt out of the cast iron, the carbon that's left, because it's typically, I don't know, it's like, what is it, 50 to 70, 50, what is it? I can't remember now. The content of most cast irons, good cast irons, a high carbon content, but it works really, really well, and that's why you get people like the Iron Mountain Flux. People love that. It's mostly high carbon steel and cast iron mixed with borax, but it's an anhydrous borax. So if you're buying borax from the shelf, it's not anhydrous. It's full of water. So when you put it in your forge, that water expands, the steam expands, and it turns into a bubbly white mix. And that will let oxygen under it. If you buy an anhydrous borax, it's more like little crystals. It looks like sand almost. and that will simply melt onto the steel and not go away. But most people use way too much flux in every case. They think that it's the one thing that's going to save the world, and it truly isn't. It's controlling the temperature. And there's a good practice. I'm going to put this out, and then I'm going to stop talking. If you have a propane oxyacetylene torch, something that'll get up to welding temperature, and you're doing a torch weld, take that torch and heat up a couple of pieces of steel next to one another with no flux on them, just to the point where they are starting to melt but haven't started throwing off sparks. Keep a very close eye on it. Watch that temperature. Your goggles are on, that kind of thing. Then what you can do is, in the environment you're in, with the light you're in, make sure the torch is off, take your goggles off, and look at the color of that metal that you're using in the environment that you're in. That's welding temperature for whatever your light is, whatever your situation is, whether you're in the shade or forging in a cave or in a building of some sort. And what that, if you have the ability to heat something with a torch like that in a controlled condition with some goggles on so you can see the surface starting to melt, rip your goggles off, look at that steel. That's your welding temperature for that particular type of metal in your particular situation with light. So that's a good place to start as a learning tool for new smiths. Anyway, I'm going to stop talking now, and that's a short take on something, and I bounced around a little bit only because it's unscripted, and like I said, I could go on for hours and hours about this.
Yeah, when there's so much information that can be discussed or portrayed for something, condensing a version, there are always options to learn more, to go over it in a video or do another episode on it, or to, hey, those of you watching, if you have more questions or want to know deeper, you can ask in the Discord here, and and people would gladly go over it. I know, so I feel you.
Go, Sally.
I was gonna mention to Tim, it's like, the cat, when you did that video on the cast iron powder and then adding it into flux or whatever, that kind of got me to thinking, and then I was like, I wonder, and then so I added it in flux and then just sprinkled it on some cable that I was welding up, and I gotta say, I really love adding the cast iron powder to flux. The carbon migration does some really neat stuff to patterns. So
and Tim, when you're talking about, you just quickly brush it on. You get going for hours about it. We've been going on it for hundreds of years about it. Really, at the end of the day, So yeah, this is I think this is the topic that will never end, but it's always interesting to have, particularly with, people like yourself and Roy.
I'm gonna have to break this into 2 episodes.
You might have to. I mean, if everybody's cool with it, we'll go an extra 15 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, we're coming up on 2 hours, so I mean,
yeah, we are.
Holy. So, I am more than happy to talk about this topic, all day long. I don't have a problem with that. But now that I've figured out how to make my microphone work, nobody taught me about the push to talk button thing and setting up your hotkey and blah, blah, blah. And, old guy technology, we don't mix very well all the time.
Okay, so Roy wants to ask you a question there, Tim. He goes, do you believe that he'll be able to get the Harbor Freight Anvil to weld, and what would you recommend that he does different?
I was looking at that, and I raised an eyebrow a little bit because typically the Harbor Freight anvils are a higher quality cast iron anvil, and to get that to forge weld to a high carbon steel plate, it's going to be a trick. It could be done. It could be done with the right medium, the right temperature, under a controlled environment. I saw a little, I think it was a Instagram post or something, and I saw this anvil and a couple of folks flipping it up onto a bigger anvil, and I thought to myself, they hit it and it didn't fly apart.
I
I'm
know.
wondering if these Harbor Freight anvils are made from something other than cast iron, but I don't believe they are.
Well, it's got
So,
Bondo in it too, so that like holds it together. No, I'm just
well, yeah,
If
I
you
no,
added if
I
you
think
added
that
nickel powder to the flux, would that just then be like brazing it together?
no, nickel is going to melt at a much higher temperature than a cast iron powder would, and the cast iron powder would definitely be a good medium, and I think probably a little bit of borax to get some of that surface to not solidify into a fire scale, but be more of a welding medium. So I think it could be done under the right condition, the right hammer blows, the right. Oh man, it would be. I think it would be tough to do, and if Roy pulled it off, I would love to see that because it would be a feat unmatched. I think I would have a difficult time doing it, only because I believe that anvil is made from cast iron. I haven't tested it. I looked at one like 2 days ago. I was at Harbor Freight, and I'm like, I would have to watch his video and see what he's got going there. But to be very honest with you, to simplify that project, probably what I would have done is got myself a piece of high carbon steel and the anvil, obviously, and I would have gotten myself a nice heat on that anvil, got it out onto a surface, laid the high carbon steel on it with silver solder between the two, and simply brazed it on with silver solder. The reason is it would take the impact. It would last for some time. I would have to test that for longevity, but it would be the simpler solution. But honestly, I'm intrigued by this whole thought, and I can't wait until this video comes out. If it isn't already out, I haven't checked this morning.
Yeah, and I mean, like for mine, I just welded it on with nickel 55 rods, which were well. I mean, I didn't well. I welded a bead of nickel 55 all the way around the cast iron, and then I welded the 4140 plate to it with 7018, and that worked fine. But that's why I was wondering about the nickel powder, because the nickel bonds to both the cast and the steel. But yeah, if that's got that much of a higher melting point, then that would be probably not as good when attempting a forge weld.
Yeah, you were probably doing a stick weld with that at the nickel, and it kept it very localized, so it
Yes.
probably wouldn't have melted the it wouldn't have melted the anvil at that temperature, being localized, but it would have forged or would have welded to it. So great transition medium, though. That's an awesome way to do that.
I have a question.
Nope.
I didn't want to interrupt, but the fissure anvil. Do you think they how they did it is they made the mold like bury it in the ground or whatever and put the stainless, the high carbon steel on the bottom, then poured the cast iron, or you think they to put teeth on it then poured it?
It's a
Are you
really good
talking?
question. I don't really know.
Are you talking about the like the British Fisher anvils that were wrought iron and then with the steel plate on it?
They have around here I believe it's cast iron.
Okay,
On the
so
bottom.
I can actually answer most of this because, again, this comes back to the research I've been doing. Most anvils in the world, cast iron anvils have only been a relatively recent thing. Most anvils historically in the world have actually been one of two main materials. They've either been wrought iron, which has been fully forged together, and then had a steel plate forge welded on top, if they had a steel forge weld on top, or another style of anvil which was actually pioneered by the US was cast steel. So cast steel anvil is a thing, and it was pioneered in the 1800s, 18th century, so late 1700s, early 1800s by the US and the US steel mills. But yeah, it's cast steel. Cast iron anvils haven't really been a thing in the past. So yeah, casting a steel plate onto an anvil wasn't really done. And I mean, of
Okay.
course, people have always tried. They've always tried different things throughout the past. But it was the main, predominantly main type, particularly for a company like Fisher, would have been wrought iron with a forge welded on plate.
Okay.
I did think the Fishers were cast steel though.
Or cast steel. And cast steel, of course, is actually most anvils nowadays are cast steel. Most quality anvils nowadays are cast steel because and back then quality anvils, particularly in the US, were cast steel because they actually last better and they're better. They've got a better rebound, better quality, more homogenized, and less likely to crack.
Yeah, I tried welding on the fissure and that, and it's just like welding on raw iron, not raw iron, cast iron. So
Quit off topic completely on the subject of Harbor Freight anvils.
You
So, yes,
you've got to carry. You've got to carry. I mean, what is it made of? Yames?
carry is a cast iron body with a tool steel face. I believe it's it's cast iron, not wrought. Real quick question there.
There you go. I stand corrected.
Thomas Goodamoot, are you going to Quad State or is Roy making you work? Because Roy's asking for Harbor Freight anvils, and I can't ship my Harbor Freight anvil. I've got it earmarked for Roy. I can put it in Sully's car and bring it to you. If anybody is going up to Roy's place, they can transfer it for me. Use the Blacksmiths Express.
unfortunately, I won't be able to help.
Yeah. So, but Fisher anvils. Back to that. Fisher anvils are cast iron bodies with a forge welded face. That's how they were made. That's how they operate, and that's why they're so quiet.
Yeah.
I found a Fisher wiki page. I'm trying to copy some of it. Early Fisher cast iron anvils with high carbon steel plate top were often brazed using bronze or silica based bronze and sand to affix plate to cast iron in the early days. Later, friction welding of high carbon steel plate to cast iron was used early 20th century. Apparently, they had multiple ways of doing it, and some were to cast the iron over a steel block and machine face to fit. So yeah, the question you ask about did they put teeth on it or whatever, apparently they had some form of steel plate that they would pour the cast iron onto and then machine it flat afterwards.
Okay.
So they had multiple ways of doing it, a lot of which we have talked about here. Like I said, I was trying to copy that, but it's not. I'm not computer good.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I was going to say that.
I hear you, Uncle Buck.
Obviously, particularly Fisher being a it would have been that they would have everyone's heard of a Fisher anvil, so that's obviously a process that must have been unique to them, and they've obviously made good anvils. So yeah, unique to them. That wasn't very copied because again, I said what I said because that is the most, from my research, the most common way with the wrought and with a forged plate or cast steel. But yeah, I stand corrected and I apologize. I retract my previous statement.
Well, it's all good. I appreciate your letting me know what you know.
Yeah. Uncle Buck's Forge just said as a second idea, Giannis, I could take the anvil and hold it till Roy comes through. That you can. So I will bring the Harbor Freight anvil to Quad State. I am going to sign it and let whoever else wants to sign it, and then let Roy destroy it or do things to it. Do naughty things to this Harbor Freight anvil.
So I was on mute there, Adam. So did you essentially digress?
I did digress. There's a couple more shots of people. Anyway, so we're now getting to the pointy end of the podcast. Let's just take a few moments to talk about what's happening next weekend over in the US. So I really, really wish I was there for.
Okay. I'm excited about this. Since all right, I'll start because I didn't get to do my weekly thing. So next week, I'm going to attempt to do this show on OBS and on my laptop and everything from John's house. However, it may be a phone show, which would mean Discord won't be a part of it. It will just be my phone set up, and everybody who's there at the coffee grounds that morning who wants to hop on and in front of the camera, unless we get over to the fairgrounds that early and all that stuff to do it there. And anybody there who wants to hop in, we'll play that by ear. But next week we'll be at Quad State. I believe, Sully, how's your schedule looking for travel time?
Now I'm looking at tomorrow midday.
Okay, so with that, we will probably give Sully a rest on driving and head out either Monday night or Tuesday Tuesday morning, early morning and whatnot.
Last morning I was 9 hours from Josh, and I was 21 hours from you. And I'm like,
okay.
I'm not driving 21 hours.
Okay, so I see John's in here in the chat. So yeah, we'll be there we'll be there Tuesday, I'm sure. So
yeah, I might as well. I'm probably going to overnight here. We might as well, or down the road a piece. We might as well overnight at your place and then get a fresh start Tuesday morning, so we're not just. I'm not just running on this continuous 2, 3, 4 hours of sleep all the time. So
yeah, so if that's all right, John, we will be there as soon as we can without busting Sully's mental integrity. However, so next week at Quad State, I intend on doing a lot of those 15-second clips that I did last year. I intend on trying to go live throughout, do a live walk around, stuff like that. Hope to get some footage and whatnot. I'll try to remember all that. This was an amazing show, and I believe it will be split into 2 episodes for the podcast. I'll let Sully go over that. I am super psyched. I am going to be getting out and straightening up my shop and preparing for my Sunday evening live stream. And speaking of flux, I'm going to be working on that Jelly Roll Damascus. I've had it in vinegar pickling, getting all the scale off of it. Then I'm going to take and spray it real good, brush it, and hit it with some WD-40. And I've got a trick that me and Sully had discussed that I'm going to try to do and make this thing an awesome piece, which will be a really cool bowl when it's done. So, all of that. Moving on. Final thoughts, everybody.
Yeah. I just got lots and lots of driving. I think my entire round trip for the next 10 days is pushing close to 4,000 miles. So, but hey, I drive for a living. Technically, I guess I drive for a living, but I don't do a lot of driving. I completely. Oh yeah. Hold on, I gotta do a pause break for editing, so I can. I need to clip a line and put it at the beginning of the episode. So, so we're gonna have to cut this into 2 episodes for sure. So by the time you're listening to this on the podcast, this is going to be at the beginning of episode 1. But this stream goes on for just over 2 hours, and that's a bit much for one podcast. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this up into 2, part 1 and part 2. I don't know exactly where that's going to be, but I'm going to shoot for somewhere 10 minutes either side of the hour. Also, there will not be a podcast episode out next week. I did not, I mean, like I worked 88 out of 96 hours. I did not get a chance to edit last week's episode. And so it is not slated to go up next week. And I won't have access to my computer to do this one. So when I get back next Monday, when I get back next Tuesday, I'll be editing last week, this week, and next week all at the same time. And then I will kind of space those out every 4 days or so, or three. But I have three, one, two. Yeah, I have 3 episodes to put up. I'll add this one here, 1 and 2, at the same time, and then I'll do them in 3-day intervals so that they stay in order, but you're not getting hit with 4 episodes at the same time. So that's the way that's going to go. And other than that, my thoughts on flux. It is a magical, metal welding glue. I mean, like, I don't care what Roy says. You can sprinkle it on cold metal and just weld that stuff together. Okay, not really, but flux. The compound used. There's so many variables. Just use what you like best. Like, I really like Iron Mountain flux, but I also am enamored with adding cast iron powder to flux because of what it adds to the piece, especially in pattern welded stuff. Now, so for you, use what's right, but be aware that always using flux is, like Roy said, it's going to hinder your ability to recognize a good forge weld. So learning how to forge weld without flux is probably a good practice. And then once you can do that, you'll have a better understanding of when you should use a little bit of borax. And for this project, I'm not going to need it. It's just a little forge weld, no big deal. Okay, now I forgot what I was going to say. I had something to go. Oh yeah. No, that's not it. Oh well, must not have been important. Use however much flux you want. Be careful if you're mixing your own stuff, especially the recipes that were presented today. Some of those could be very dangerous, both in reactions when you're mixing them up and in possible off-gassing chemicals. Because just because you mix 2 things together doesn't mean it's a mixture. Add heat or solvent and things can get haywire real quick. So always be careful with mixing different chemicals together, and get out to your shop, put on your PPE, and use a little flux. See you guys next week at Quad State.
Okay, so thanks for watching. If you like this, if you've liked what you've seen and heard on these episodes, don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button. You can find Yames on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Sorry, not Facebook. Sorry, Instagram, YouTube, and where else? Somewhere else. I can't remember.
CoinMerge.
CoinMerge, that's it, at Island Metal Forge. You can find Sully at Transcendental Artist Studios on Instagram and YouTube and TikTok. And you can find me, Adam, at Speargrass Forge on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Also, don't forget to check out the Practical Blacksmithing Annotated, available now on Amazon. That's volumes 1 and 2, paperback and Kindle for the world, and also in hardcover for the UK and the US. If you're listening to the podcast, which you can find on most of your favorite podcasting providers, being Spotify, Anchor, Google Play, all that type of thing, we're just waiting on a certain fruit company to finally actually allow us to put our podcast on their platform. Don't forget to leave us a star rating. It really helps. It helps not only put us at the top of the list, but also helps put us out there to people that might not have listened to us before. And as my friend has said, even though they're not blacksmiths, they've learned a hell of a lot just by listening to us, and also it makes their week get a kick out of the interaction that we have with you guys. So don't forget to leave a star rating for us. Again, we go live every Sunday morning. That's 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time in the US, and that's 11:30 p.m. currently Australian Central Standard Time. But check against your local time to confirm that is true, because it may be different for where you are in the world. And finally, even though you guys are going to be at Quad State, I am really, really jealous. I wish I was over there with you all this year. It's another year that I haven't been able to make it, and that's because the things have gone sideways. It's annoying me. I can't be there. I'm really, really sad, and I get miss out on meeting John and all you guys face to face.
Next year.
But hopefully, fingers crossed, if things don't look like I'm going to have to start a GoFundMe, I swear, I'll get on OnlyFans. then you can listen to, put the book on, turn the lights down low. Anyway, so with that, I'll pass you over to Yammers, and he can share his final thoughts of the evening.
Well, firstly, I'd like to offer, I know we've got a big crowd here. I'd like to offer Black Collar and Big Dog any final thoughts and whatnots.
Pleasure to be back.
Glad to have you back.
You probably be seeing us for a good bit. So, and I won't be making it to Quad State, so I'm in the same boat as you. Grass.
All right. Well, look forward to when you can make it.
Yeah, probably next year.
Cool. So Big Dog, any final thoughts? Did we lose Big Dog's audio? He's probably laying back in his chair like this. They're talking to me.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Right on. I was on a mute type thing. I was on another thing. Anyway, sorry. No, I really don't have much to say. Thank you for letting me join in your show today. And you guys have fun at Quad State. I was just actually looking at airline flights and round trip tickets and blah, blah, blah. See if I could fly out for a day or something. But yeah, I don't know. It's not that expensive. Round trip's about $250. So something that, might see me pop up at Quad State. Don't count on it, but you never know. Anyway, guys, thanks again. I'm going to head out here. I got to go take care of my dogs, and you guys have a good one. It's good to see you, Adam, Sully, and I'll see you guys later. Take care. Drive safe, Sully. Keep you guys on the road.
You take care, too, Jim.
Always a pleasure.
And thank you all for being a part of the show. Big thanks to my co-hosts. Big thanks to my guests. Thank you, Roy. Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Black Collar. Thank you all who sent super chats and have added to the membership of the channel. To all of you who have chatted in here. This was an awesome, awesome time today. And I hope next week goes off without a hitch, all the live streams and all the little things that I plan on doing. And I look forward to seeing you all in person if I can. And, hopefully all at my show tonight. With that, I'm going to go ahead and, put an end to this shindig. Thank you all. Be safe, be productive, and overall be creative and have fun. Yeah. So, peace.
Good night.
Bye, guys.
Bye. I'll miss you all.
And we're clear.